Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me, box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. If you've not already, I do encourage you to check out my ebooks, All I Needed to Know I Learned from Columbo and All I Needed to Know I Learned from Dragnet. Each examines the careers and histories of 7 great fictional detectives and policemen and the life lessons that can be learned from them. Now it's time for this week's episode of Mr. Chameleon. The original air date, August 24th, 1949. And this one is The Vacation Murder Case.
Next, Mr. Chameleon and The Vacation Murder Case. Tonight, we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in his famous cases of crime and murder. Brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the famous and dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, we give you Mr. Chameleon in The Vacation Murder Case. It is evening, and the lobby of the Surf Hotel, a seaside resort hotel very near New York City, is crowded with people passing through to the veranda to take their lunch in the fresh ocean breeze. Most of the faces are serene and laughing after the day of swimming and rest. But as the elevator opens, a tall young man with a very definite frown on his face hurries over to the desk, followed by his wife.
Clerk! Clerk!
Yes?
Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell, is there something I can do for you?
My wife's been robbed.
My jewels have been taken.
Robbed?
Our
Why,
rooms ransacked, clothes thrown everywhere.
My wife and I and our baby just came back from the beach and discovered it.
My engagement ring, the one thing in the world I wouldn't want to lose. It's been stolen.
Better call the police.
Yes, the police, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell. But wait a second. Here comes Mr. Ferris.
Why, Mr. Ferris, what's happened?
My wife, she's been murdered.
Murdered?
Oh, no.
I found her strangled to death in our room.
Well, that's terrible, Mr. Ferris. Was she robbed?
I suppose she was. Our whole place was turned upside down when I came in. And my wife dead.
2 robberies and a murder in 10 minutes.
I'll call the police. No, I just remembered. Mr. Chameleon, the famous detective, happens to be here for the day. He's sitting out on the veranda. I'll get him.
And a short time later, we find Mr. Chameleon, the famous and dreaded detective of Central Police Headquarters, talking to Henry Ferris, whose wife has been murdered, and to Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell.
Now, Mr. Ferris, I'd like to get on with the questioning without delay. Can you remember the last time that you saw your wife before she was murdered?
She was sitting out on the veranda, watching me swim, and then she went into the hotel again, probably to take a rest. I didn't see her again until I found her murdered.
Mr. Ferris, did your wife have any valuable jewelry? Now, I ask this because Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell here reported a jewel robbery in this hotel just before you reported your wife's murder.
Jewels? Yes. One piece of great value, the famous Pretoria diamond.
What? The Pretoria diamond? Mr. Ferris, that represents at least $100,000. Was your wife wearing it?
She had it made into a clip, and I foolishly brought it down here to her. I don't know whether she was wearing it today or not.
You don't remember by some chance the exact time that she left the veranda and went back into the hotel, do you?
Well, no.
Mr. Chameleon.
Yes, Miss Cartwell.
I believe I saw Mrs. Ferris. She rode up in the same elevator that I did.
Do you remember the time, Mrs. Cartwell?
I believe it was about 10 after 4.
And do you by any chance remember whether she was wearing a large diamond clip?
I don't remember very well. I hate to say for sure when it's so important. I just don't remember, really. I was carrying our baby.
Please, think hard, Mrs. Cartwell. It's very important. You're sure that you don't remember any clip?
No. You say it was a clip? I don't remember her wearing any clip. Oh, I wish I could remember,
Well, if
but...
you can't, you can't. Did you see anyone besides Mrs. Ferris in the elevator? Or when you got off on the floor where you have your room?
No. No, I didn't see anyone. Oh, I guess I'm just not much help.
Anything you can remember will be help, Mrs. Cartwell.
Well, I went straight to my own room, Mr. Chameleon. I was tired of carrying the baby and came up to get the nurse to take him out in the buggy. You might ask the nurse if she saw anyone when she came down.
Yes, Alice, our nurse, might be able to give some help. She might have seen someone, Mr. Chameleon.
You say her name is Alice? Alice what, Mr. Cartwell?
Alice Gray. I think she's out on the boardwalk with the baby now.
Alice Gray. Get the nurse's name down, will you, Detective Sergeant Arnold?
Right, Mr. Chameleon.
And Dave, check her after we get through here. Find out if she saw anybody when she came down with the baby.
Okay, sir.
Mrs. Cartwell, did you stay in the room after you brought the baby up?
No. No, I freshened up a bit, and then I joined my husband back on the beach.
And you didn't see anyone in the hallway when you came down that time either?
No, I didn't see anybody.
Anybody might have seen anybody. What difference does it make? My wife's been murdered.
We want the killer caught, Mr. Ferris. And we'll succeed if everyone will answer my questions so I can get some leads. Now, I want you to think carefully. Have you formed any new acquaintances here at the hotel, Mr. Ferris? Did anyone go out of his way to meet you and your wife, or be with you?
I don't know. Nobody of any importance, anyway.
Let me decide that, will you, Mr. Ferris?
Well, there are two people, a woman named Marietta Arlen and her son. His name's Reggie.
Why, we know them, too. They came over and practically forced us to play cards with them.
Yes, won a lot of money from us.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwell. You seemed a little reluctant to mention them, Mr. Ferris. Why?
Well, they're not my kind of people. There's nothing wrong with them, but...
Well, but what, Mr. Ferris?
Well, they play cards just a little too well, and the mother dresses like she was 20 instead of 60. They're just not the kind of people I like to associate with, but they're not killers, not that old woman.
Sometimes, Mr. Ferris, we're very surprised to find out who in this world are killers. Now, the Arlens played cards in your suite and in the Cartwells, both of the places where the robberies took place. That might have been just a clever way to find out where people kept their jewelry. I think I'll have a talk with them. Come along, Dave. Oh, by the way, Mr. Ferris, you're a stockbroker, aren't you?
That's right. How did you know?
That's not important. It is important that you haven't been doing so well lately, though.
What?
In fact, $100,000 would come in awfully handy, wouldn't it?
What are you talking about, Mr. Chameleon?
Nothing for sure, Mr. Ferris, except that you told me yourself that you brought that fabulous diamond here to a summer resort.
I told my wife to put it in the hotel safe, but she wouldn't.
So you say. But I know that you needed money quite badly, and this might have been your way to get that diamond.
Do you think I killed my wife?
I don't know. You could have killed her, or anybody in this hotel could have.
Do you think Ferris killed his wife for that jewel, Mr. Chameleon?
I've no idea, Dave.
Well, he seems pretty broken up.
I know. That's why I've become a little suspicious of him. He seems overly broken up for a man who spent half of his life in the gossip columns over his marital mix-ups. Well, I guess this is the Arlen suite, Dave. Suite 33.
Sure is nice and close to the murdered woman's suite.
Mm-hmm. And to the Cartwells, too. In fact, the Arlens could have done both jobs and not had to go more than 50 feet along the corridor in either direction. Very convenient.
Want me to come in with you?
No, Dave. You go down on the boardwalk and see if you can dig up the Cartwell's nurse.
You mean Alice Gray?
Ask Miss Gray if she saw anyone in this hall when she was taking the baby down, near the time of the murder.
Leave it to me, Mr. Chameleon.
Dave, if she's friendly, make up to her a bit.
I get you.
Yes?
Are you Mrs. Marietta Arlen?
I am Mrs. Arlen.
I'd like to ask you and your son a few questions, Mrs. Arlen.
Questions? I don't understand.
I'm with the police.
Oh. Well, come right in then.
What is, Mom? Someone... Oh, pardon me. I did-
This man is undoubtedly a detective, Reggie.
Detective?
I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters.
My goodness, Reggie, have you been driving too fast
It
again?
has nothing to do with your son's driving, Mrs. Arlen.
I should hope not. He's a terrible driver, but he tries, Mr. Chameleon. He's just got that...
Mrs. Arlen, Mrs. Ferris in the suite next to yours has just been murdered.
What? Mrs. Ferris? That sweet woman? Oh, who'd want to murder her?
Someone who wanted to get his hands on a little $100,000 diamond.
Well, what's that got to do with us?
Yes, what's that got to do with us? Can't I come to a hotel for a rest without having everybody bothering me about robberies and murders? Why, I just don't know why I have to put up with things like this. I don't think it's very nice of you to come around here acting as if you suspect us.
No one said that you were under suspicion.
Then what do you want to question us about, Mr. Chameleon? We're just here for a vacation.
Of course, Reggie. And now we have to be all tangled up in a murder. Why, it's outrageous. I thought this was a quiet hotel where people could come and rest, away from such awful things.
Mrs. Arlen, I understand that you and your son Reggie play some rather fancy card games.
Well, what's wrong with that? Can't a lady have some amusement to help pass her old age?
I hardly call playing for the amount of money that you do amusement.
Well, we can't help it if other people want to play for money. We don't care about little money ourselves.
Perhaps not, Reggie. Perhaps you care more for jewelry. Do you mind if I look around your rooms?
This is our suite, Mr. Chameleon. What right have the police to barge in and search through our things?
It won't help your story any if I have to send for a warrant.
Let him look if he wants to so much, Reggie, dear.
Nothing in this chest.
Of course, there's nothing in that chest or anywhere, Mr. Chameleon. It just makes me feel terrible to think that nice people have to be...
Mrs. Arlen, do you have the key to this trunk?
Give him the key, Reggie.
Here, I'll even open it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I hope you're satisfied.
I am not completely, Mrs. Arlen. Have either you or Reggie been out of this hotel in the last 2 hours?
We've been reading here in the room. Now, have you finished your investigation?
Maybe. But there's just a lot about you that strikes me as worth investigating. In fact, I think I'll phone headquarters and see if there are any records on a mother and son.
Why chase us? There are other people who have been on this floor today. People who know the Ferris and Cartwell suites as well as we do. There's one who...
Reggie? Reggie gets excited, Mr. Chameleon. He just means that there's a lot of people in the rooms on this floor.
If you don't mind, Mrs. Arlen, let's let Reggie talk for himself. Just what did you mean, Reggie?
I mean Harley Mounts, the desk clerk down the lobby. I've seen him here more than once leaving the Ferris suite when they weren't around.
Well, naturally, Harley goes into rooms. He goes into lots of rooms. He works for the hotel, doesn't he?
Harley? Well, you know him well enough to use his first name. Sometimes it's very handy to know hotel clerks by their first names, Mrs. Arlen.
I'm a friendly woman, Mr. Chameleon. I've always made it a point to know people's first names.
Yes, especially Harley Mounts.
Reggie?
Mother, I'm tired of you making eyes at him like you're a 16-year-old girl.
That diamond got out of the murdered Mrs. Ferris' room some way. A hotel clerk might make an excellent carrier.
Are you accusing us, Mr. Chameleon?
I never accuse anyone until I know, Mrs. Arlen. But I think I will go have a talk with your friend, the desk clerk, Harley Mounts.
Yes? Oh, it's you, Mr. Chameleon. Have you found any clues to the murder yet? I do hope you get whoever did this...
Mr. Mounts, there are a couple of things that I want to ask you.
Me? Oh, of course. If there's anything I can help you with, I'd be glad to.
Just how do you happen to know the Arlens?
Why, they're just friends, that's all. They're just friends.
Mm-hmm. You all seem to be great friends. Where'd you meet them?
I met them last winter in Florida. I clerk at the resort hotels there in the winter and up here in the summer.
Florida, what hotel?
I don't understand what you're getting at, Mr. Chameleon. What's the hotel I worked at in Florida got to do with all this?
I'll decide that. What hotel was it?
The terrace. The Park Terrace.
Am I wrong, Mr. Mounts? Or wasn't that the hotel that had so many robberies last winter?
Why, it had a few, I guess.
Have you been out of this hotel since the murder and since that diamond was stolen?
No. No, I've been right here, and I can prove it, too.
I was afraid of that. Well, if no one has left this hotel, that diamond must still be around here. Or else whoever got it out of here had some very clever plan. But how? And, more important, who?
Desk? Miss Mount speaking. Oh, yes, he's right here. Now, Mr. Chameleon, it's for you.
Well, thank you. Chameleon speaking.
Boy, am I glad to get hold of you, Mr. Chameleon.
What is it, Dave?
I just found that nurse, Alice Gray. I had to look all over the beach, but I finally found her pushing the baby buggy up and down the boardwalk.
Did she say that she saw anyone in the hall near the time of the murder?
She said there was a man waiting by the elevator right across from where Mrs. Ferris was strangled, but that he went back down the hall when she came out of the room.
Could she describe him?
She did better than that. She said it was Reggie Arlen.
Mr. Chameleon and the vacation murder case continues in just a moment. Next time you want relief from an ordinary headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain, remember that one thing you can take with complete confidence is genuine Bayer aspirin. You can take it confident of amazingly fast relief, for Bayer aspirin is actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds. And you can take it confident of really dependable relief, for no other pain reliever can match its record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect. Don't ever forget this record. It's important because it means you can take Bayer aspirin sure in the knowledge that it will bring you the gentle relief that's important to your health. So don't experiment with drugs that have not been proved by years of successful use. For the two most important kinds of relief, fast relief and dependable relief, do as millions do. Be sure with Bayer aspirin. When you buy, ask for it by its full name, Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle, and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now, back to Mr. Chameleon and the vacation murder case. Just as Horton Cartwell finishes reporting to the desk clerk that some jewelry has been stolen from his hotel room, another man, Henry Ferris, reports that his wife has been murdered and her fabulous diamond is missing. Chameleon, on vacation at the same hotel, finds that both have been playing cards with Marietta and Reggie Arlen, a mother and son of rather dubious character. He searches their rooms, but the stolen diamond isn't there. And now we find Mr. Chameleon with Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold in the Cartwell suite, talking to the Cartwell's nurse, Alice, who has just said the last person she saw in the hotel corridor before the murder was Reggie Arlen. Chameleon is saying,
Alice, you say it was Reggie Arlen whom you saw in the hall about the time Mrs. Ferris was murdered?
Oh, I'm positive it was, Mr. Chameleon. I wouldn't make a mistake about something as serious as this.
Reggie Arlen says that he was reading at the time of the murder, but he has only his mother for a witness.
Shall I go pick him up, Mr. Chameleon? You want me to run him and his mother in?
On what charge, Dave? We still haven't got a thing on anybody. Of course, we have Alice's statement that he was in the hall, but there's still no law against a man being in a hotel hallway.
Well, we don't seem to be getting very far on this case, do we?
We could only locate the diamond or find out how it was taken out of the hotel. I think we see Reggie again. Wait, who's that?
Oh, here you are, Mr. Chameleon. Have you found anything yet?
No, not yet, Mrs. Cartwell.
My husband and I have been trying to figure things out ourselves, but it seems we weren't born to be detectives. We've been down watching the people in the lobby. We thought you'd want to know if anyone checked out in a big hurry.
Well, that was very nice of you.
But we didn't see one person check out.
Thank you for trying to help, Mrs. Cartwell. I'm just questioning your baby's nurse, Alice Gray. Alice, was Reggie Arlen the only person that you saw in the hall? No one else at all?
He was the only person, Mr. Chameleon. There wasn't anybody else anywhere that I noticed.
My husband looked all over the beach, too, Mr. Chameleon. He tried to find people who seemed suspicious, but he said they all looked like such nice people. He said none of them looked like the kind who would steal my jewelry or Mrs. Ferris' jewelry or murder anyone.
Mrs. Cartwell, A clip made with a famous Pretoria diamond and worth $100,000 might interest a lot of people who look nice.
But murder! I can't see how anyone would murder for a diamond brooch, even if the brooch is worth $100,000.
Sometimes we're all very fooled about things. Well, I've got to get busy. Thank you again for trying to help, Mrs. Cotwell.
My husband's still down in the lobby keeping watch. I'll go down and help him. I do so want to get my engagement ring back.
Oh, what a woman.
Do you want me to stay for any more questions, Mr. Chameleon, or is it all right if I take the baby out for his buggy ride now?
Certainly, Miss Gray. You go right ahead.
Maybe I ought to go along.
I think that Alice can make out all right by herself, Dave. You come along with me.
To see Reggie?
No. We're going to see Mr. Ferris, the murdered woman's husband, again. There are a couple of things that I want to ask him that may blow this case wide open. Mr. Ferris, there are a couple of points that I want to clear up.
I've told you all I know, Mr. Chameleon. Do you have to keep asking questions all the time?
That is my way of solving a murder, Mr. Ferris. Now, first, can you tell me any more about your wife's diamond clip?
It's just a clip. It had a kind of safety pin hook on the back of it.
Clips don't work that way. Brooches always do.
Maybe so.
And you said before that you were out on the beach when your wife was murdered. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, that's right.
Can you possibly remember whether everyone you saw on the beach had on a swimming suit? I mean, was there anyone who wasn't wearing a swimming suit?
On the beach? I guess they all wore bathing suits. If I remember right, though, there were several dressed people up on the boardwalk.
Do you remember anybody in particular?
What are you getting at? Are you still trying to prove I murdered my wife?
Nobody said that you murdered your wife, Mr. Ferris. But believe me, we're going to find out who did. Now, do you remember anyone in particular on that boardwalk?
I don't know. Yes, there was one character, a man in a loud silk shirt. He was cheap-looking. I remember thinking he looked awfully out of place at this resort, but he couldn't have murdered my wife. He was down on the boardwalk when it happened.
It begins to fit into the plan now. It all begins to fit.
Say, Mr. Chameleon, look out this window. To top everything else off, it's clouding up to rain. Everybody's coming in off the beach.
Well, you got it bad, Dave. Or isn't your blonde nurse out there yet?
No, she isn't out there. No nurse, no baby buggy. Guess Alice won't be out there with this rain coming up.
Now who's calling? Yes, Mr. Chameleon's here. Just a minute. It's for you.
Thank you. Chameleon speaking. Yes? Well, you say they reported it just now? Very well, Mr. Mounts. I'll take care of it. There's just been another jewel robbery.
Good Lord, another one?
Oh, there must be a gang operating here.
What move do we make now, Mr. Chameleon?
You see anybody out on that beach now, Dave?
No, of course not. There's no one out there now. It's too stormy.
Well, keep watching out there along the boardwalk. Mr. Ferris, I think that we'll have your wife's murderer very soon now.
Mr. Chameleon, there is someone out there now. It's that nurse, Alice Gray. She's wheeling that baby buggy right out of the hotel. She's strolling along the boardwalk as though she didn't even care about the rain.
I thought so. Keep an eye on her, Dave. I think a man in a very gaudy silk shirt is coming to talk to her in just a minute. A man who deals in stolen jewelry without asking questions.
You mean a fence? Are you going to disguise yourself as a fence this time, Mr. Chameleon?
That's the general idea.
Well, I don't get it. What?
I think you will in about 5 minutes, buddy. Just keep a big eye on your girlfriend. Hello, sweetheart. Giving the kids some air?
That's right. Giving the baby some air. Got any objections?
No. Except it looks pretty rainy to be taking a stroll.
Then what are you out here for?
Oh, I got reasons. The same reasons you got. That is, if you got something in mind beside wheeling a baby up and down.
You know why I'm out here. Did Corkins send you? Why didn't Corkins come himself?
He's tied up, sweetheart. Won't I, though? Come on, give me the stuff.
Well, reach under the pillow and hurry up and get out of here.
Yeah, sure. Sure, sweetheart. We'll wait the same arrangement next time.
There isn't going to be any next time
What
here.
are you talking about?
Chameleon's in on this case. I'm pulling out of here.
Does he know anything?
I don't know, but it's getting too hot since we had to knock off that Ferris woman. I'll contact you from someplace else.
I don't think that will be necessary, Alice Gray.
What?
Where you're going, you won't need contacts for a long time.
What? Well, you're Mr. Chameleon.
That's right, Alice Gray. Chameleon the cop. The real fence ought to be along any moment.
What?
Now. Oh, yes. I'm not mistaken. Here he comes along the boardwalk now. Don't try anything, Alice.
Hey, Alice, I'm late. Hey, who are you? Who's this guy?
He's...
Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. And I take it that you're Calkins, the man who disposes of stolen jewelry for this ring. Don't move, Calkins. It's not healthy with this gun pointed at you.
You haven't a thing on us. Not a thing.
Don't be foolish, Alice Gray. I have enough to put you on trial for murder. I just took that $100,000 Pretoria diamond for which murder was committed out of this baby buggy.
Here are Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell, Mr. Chameleon.
What is this? What's happened?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, what is it?
I've just taken the $100,000 Pretoria diamond for which a woman was murdered out of your baby's pram, Mr. and Mrs. Cartwell.
You don't mean Alice Gray, our nurse?
I told my husband not to hire that girl, Mr. Chameleon. I was afraid of her from the beginning.
You what? Now listen to me, Mr. Chameleon.
That's enough from you, Alice.
And to think my baby's nurse is a jewel thief.
And a murderess. Mr. Chameleon, I know it's true, but it seems impossible.
I'll tell you what's impossible, Cartwell.
I'll finish the story, Alice. But first, Detective Sergeant Arnold. Dave, put the handcuffs on Mrs. Cartwell.
Handcuffs on me?
Yes, you, Mrs. Cartwell.
Are you crazy, Chameleon? Let my wife alone.
And incidentally, Cartwell, if you don't get your hand off that gun in your pocket, I'll put a bullet in you. You've never been near a death in your life.
He killed Mrs. Ferris, Mr. Chameleon. He killed her, I tell you.
Shut up, Alice, you lying fool.
And I have to thank Mrs. Cartwell for putting me onto the solution of one of the rarely clever murder cases of my experience.
Me?
When I purposely referred to the murdered woman's jewel as a clip, you referred to it as a brooch. And brooch is what it was. If you hadn't seen it, and you said that you hadn't, you wouldn't have known that it was a brooch.
But I did.
And then, when you were always so anxious to get the baby out of the hotel in his buggy, it occurred to me there couldn't be a more clever way to get a stolen jewel out of the place and into a fence's hands than in a baby buggy.
But that doesn't prove murder, Chameleon.
You'll find that it does, Cartwell, when you, your wife, and your accomplice, Alice Gray, go on trial for murder. And thank you again, Mrs. Cartwell. You made my one-day vacation at the seashore a highly interesting day. Take them all in, Dave.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. When you have a social or business engagement, don't let an ordinary headache upset it. Remember, Bayer aspirin will bring you relief and quickly. Millions know how fast Bayer aspirin works. If you've never tried it, a simple test will show you how quickly a Bayer aspirin tablet is ready to go to work. This test reveals what happens in your stomach when you take Bayer aspirin. All you do is drop the tablet in a glass of water and time its disintegrating speed. When it starts to disintegrate, it's ready to go to work. And as you'll see, Bayer aspirin tablets start disintegrating almost instantly. They bring amazingly fast relief because they're actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds. When you buy, ask for genuine Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle, and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, a man of many faces, in the Mistreated Wife murder case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Karl Swenson, with dialogue by Cheryl Hendricks and Frank Hummert from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Warren Sweeney.
To millions, tooth decay means suffering, worry, expense. But now, thanks to a remarkable scientific discovery, you can actually cut down tooth decay simply by using new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it actually destroys bacterial Lactobacillus acidophilus, which cause tooth decay. As a result, dentists by the thousands recommend this type dentifrice. So to cut down tooth decay, to have sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyon's tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon and the Mistreated Wife murder case next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. So the murder happens on the one day that Mr. Chameleon is on vacation there. What are the odds? Never mind, I don't think we're meant to ask that. I do think, though, as a matter of fairness, a one-day vacation is a little bit less than you'd expect that a famous investigator would be entitled to. Of course, even though he's having to work while on vacation, he's not facing the best of the underworld here. If your cover is pushing a sleepy, unseen baby who's in a carriage, taking him out in bad weather is a good way to blow your cover. Bonus points for believing that Chameleon's randomly invented voice was the fence, despite her actually knowing the fence. Of course, I also suspected her employers. One of my keys to solving these is not only to look for people who are over-the-top virtuous, because they're usually not, but also people who behave in ways that are over-the-top foolish or eccentric. Usually, characters in that situation more than not are using that as a mask for guilt, and their whole, we were helping you look for the murderer thing was just too dumb to be believed. Alright, well, listener comments and feedback, and we start in the email box. And we start with Derek, who writes, "My hat's off to Karl Weber. His murdered girl's ear voice didn't actually sound like Mr. Chameleon, which was nice. However, his chosen hidden identity name of Slick Sampson was a dead giveaway that he was a crook. I mean, he was going around to all the potential suspects saying, 'Hello, my name is Slick Sampson and I'm a pickpocket.' Wouldn't a real criminal try to hide the fact that they are a criminal? Oh well, it's better than rob you blind, I'll take your money, frankly, gonna steal your car." And some clever spellings to make those a little more plausible. Happy Father's Day. Well, thank you so much, Derek. I would say that in this case, if the character that Weber as Mr. Chameleon was playing was legitimate, he was a criminal, and that's what kind of gave explanation for why he was able to offer what he did. So him using the name Slick Sampson wasn't unbelievable. You do have a different problem if you're a criminal who doesn't want people to know you're a criminal and you go by a nickname like that. Though I would assume you would give your given name or a made-up name rather than going around using a name that was a dead giveaway to your chosen, shall we say, profession. Then we also have some piercing comments regarding the same episodes. Over on Facebook, Daniel writes, "Very interesting story. We don't think much about pierced ears these days because the practice is ubiquitous for women. But for my mother's era, she graduated high school in the early 50s. It was common to wear clip-ons. I remember her large collection of them. I also remember that when she decided to get her ears pierced when she was in her 40s, and what a big deal that was to her. Great episode. Another triumph for Mr. Chameleon." Over on Spotify, we have a comment from Nightwing, who writes, "My mom did not get her pierced until she was 41, 1971. So kind of bearing out the history of pierced ears that I at least wasn't aware of prior to listening to that episode. Regarding the previous episode, the Snapshot in the Park murder case, Dave writes on Spotify, I've slowly become someone who looks forward to Mr. Chameleon, but substitute Karl's Georgia accent was one of the worst Southern accents I've ever heard. Have to get you back on AC radio soon. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate the comment. Over on YouTube, Catherine writes, Swenson is definitely Mr. Chameleon to me, but I think Weber did a good job and it was a fun episode. And then Barry wrote, originally broadcast on August 3rd, 1949. I wonder who played Lorenzo Jones, a long-running Hummer daytime serial on NBC while Karl Swenson was on vacation. And he also notes apparently Howard Claney was also on vacation. CBS staff announcer Warren Sweeney filled in for him too. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the comment, Barry. In answer to Lorenzo Jones, we don't have a definitive answer because there are so few episodes of Lorenzo Jones around. But as a general rule, from my experience, you tend to handle absences in serials differently. You don't tend to recast your lead characters when they go on vacation. You just tend to write them out of the action. And there are numerous examples of this. Probably the serial that I've listened to the most was The Adventures of Superman. And oftentimes they would have supporting cast members who would disappear from the storylines for a while. There would be weeks where, for example, you wouldn't have Lois Lane or Perry White or Jimmy Olsen in a story with the other characters supporting. And when you had a situation where Bud Collyer needed to go on vacation, they had a plot line where Superman had been captured by a political boss who he had defeated earlier in the season, but the political boss had acquired kryptonite, and he had rendered Superman helpless. And so Batman and Robin stepped in and were looking for Superman. And we did not hear from Superman for a week or two. You know, if there was anything, you might hear just a little pathetic groan that could be made by anybody. And that continued on to television. And was also true on both sides of the Atlantic. If, for example, you saw the first 6 seasons of the television show Doctor Who that were in black and white and which filmed for around 40 weeks per year plus, they would give the stars a break of a week or two by having their character disappear or be unavailable, or just something happen to them like, oh, I've got to go off over here, and then the actor would take a week or so off. And so, particularly with soap operas, because you've got those sort of big dramatic things that you can introduce to take a character out of the action. So that would be my guess as to what they were probably doing on Lorenzo Jones, is he was in a coma, or the focus was on something his wife was doing, or he had disappeared at sea. You know, just kind of pick a plot out of the hat, and then you have the other actors take over. It's a lot more tricky when you're dealing with a self-contained half-hour program, because it's all centered around the star. It's all got to be completed within that single episode. And particularly on a detective program, you're left with a choice of either having someone else solve the case or having someone fill in for the detective actor. Thanks so much. I appreciate the comment. Now it is time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day. And I want to go ahead and thank Mimi. Mimi's been one of our Patreon supporters since February 2016, currently supporting the podcast at the Seamus level of $4 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, Mimi. And that will do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. And if you're enjoying the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and mark the notification bell. All those great things that help YouTube channels to grow. We will be back next Thursday with another episode of Mr. Chameleon, but join us back here tomorrow for yours truly, Johnny Dollar, where...
Now, what about the bracelet?
You mean who might have stolen it?
That's the general idea.
I don't know. I have no idea. That sound funny to you?
Should it?
Well, after all, Dan and Berta keeping their house open to everybody. People in to swim, play badminton, cocktails, barbecues. I guess half the population of Palm Springs has been there at one time or another. And even if it weren't an invited guest, why, it'd be simple for someone to just sneak in and walk off with it.
Providing, of course, they knew where it was kept.
Well, yeah, someone who was close enough to... Well, yeah, I heard Berta ask you about a reward for it.
You think a big enough reward would turn it up?
I would think so. I understand that stolen jewelry brings about 20 cents on the dollar.
Sometimes it brings 20 cents. Sometimes 20 years.
Well, yeah.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/greatdetectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.